the main thing that we're talking about here is you have to know your why. Whether it's your career in life, you need to know your why. And if you don't have a high commitment towards that why, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? No matter what you're doing. So it's like, get clear on that why, and everything else just kind of, it fills in. Momentum is going to take you that way once you get clear on that.
Welcome to Backstage Pass with the HR Rockstar, the show that pulls back the curtain and cranks up the volume on the most pressing HR topics, from talent strategies and workplace culture to career pivots and leadership. Because in today's world, HR isn't just behind the scenes, it's center stage. I'm your host, Jay Arnold, and in the world of HR and talent, there are times we recognize top performers within the workplace, sometimes referred to as rock stars. This podcast combines my love of HR as my career with my experience of 10 plus years performing shows around Michigan and the Midwest in my rock band, chasing the dream of being an actual rock star. Join me as I sit down with rock stars in their fields to have fun, insightful conversations that keep the human in human resources. Together we'll disrupt, innovate, and amplify the future of work. So grab your pass, turn it up, and let's make some noise. Joining me today is Anna Potter, principal consultant and founder of A&P International Consulting, with over 20 years of corporate experience in global mobility, compensation, and benefits at major multinational companies. Anna recently took the leap into entrepreneurship, where she now partners with clients through her own consultancy, bringing deep expertise and a strategic lens to global workforce solutions. Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show today. I'm so glad you were able to finally connect. We've worked together for a number of years, and I'm really looking forward to the podcast today.
Me too. Thank you for inviting me on.
In looking at your career trajectory, you've worked in global mobility, immigration, compensation. What initially drew you to global mobility, and how have your experience at both large and medium companies shaped your professional outlook?
So, yeah, global mobility isn't necessarily something you come out of college saying, I'm going to get into global mobility for my career, because I had no idea what global mobility was until I sat next to someone who managed global assignments at the employer we were previously at before. That's where I really learned the industry, like the global part of it, the international assignments part of it. Prior to that role, I did work at a fast food company in their corporate headquarters and was over relocation, but we only had one or two international assignments, and they were individuals going out into those countries, not necessarily bringing people into the United States. So it was a very different exposure at that former company. But when we got to the large auto supplier we both worked at, it was a totally different scale. And it just was so interesting to sit next to someone who was managing assignments. And at the time I was managing, or I was a compensation and benefits analyst. And it was just an area that I was very curious about. And so it just kind of naturally drew me in, and I stayed in it for, 15 plus years now. So it's just one of those areas. I feel like it's very magnetizing for individuals. They get in and they want to stay.
I remember when I joined the team working with you, I remember interviewing with you even. It's funny because some former coworkers at another company I was at, and even some family members and friends were like, global mobility, what's that? And depending if they're at a smaller mid-sized company and maybe there's not they don't have a big international footprint. And I've been to some HR groups on different social media platforms. And I remember seeing one person when I was a couple of years into that role, they're like, yeah, you don't ever, put pictures on your resume. It's a no-no, as anyone knows in hiring. But internationally, you do. It's not a no-no to put pictures, marital status, immigration status on an international resume, because it's so common in other parts of the world where you don't think about it.
Right.
Different, obviously, input laws. But I blew someone's mind. I said, oh, this is actually very common overseas to have it. They're like, what? So there's this whole environment of people are like, wait, there's an industry of people sending people overseas and bringing them here on assignment. It's small but big. Any large multinational company would have experience, I'm guessing, with that.
Absolutely.
So you started this year in looking at some of your posts on LinkedIn, what appears to be a trip around the world. Where did you visit? How long was your trip? And what are some stories that you can share?
Yeah. So this was a trip of a lifetime, I'd have to say. I found myself in a unique situation where I had started a company and hadn't had any, long-term clients or projects come up yet. So I was able to take 20, 21 days to, and that's exactly what I did, is circled the globe. Only 3 destinations though. So I started off in Australia, where I stayed with actually a former colleague who is now a very, very close friend, with her family in a town outside of Sydney, Australia, along the beach there near Bondi Beach. I think it's called Clovelly Beach. And that was one town away from Coogee Beach, which is where I spent a semester abroad when I was going to Michigan State University. I took a semester abroad program to Australia and went to the University of New South Wales there in Randwick. So it was the perfect opportunity for me to return almost 25 years to the day that I had went. And there was actually somebody, I overheard him in line, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm going on a semester abroad in Sydney, Australia." And he started talking about the University of New South Wales. So it was just kind of one of those whirlwinds where I'm like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. And so I stayed there for a week. Kind of went down a trip down memory lane for sure. And then went to my next destination was really India. Even thinking I was on that part of the world, I thought it would be a much shorter flight from Sydney to Mumbai. No, that is a very long, it's like a 12-hour flight. So when I was starting to make the arrangements and I was talking to some other friends, they're like, stop in Singapore. And yeah, I was like, okay, well, I have former colleagues in Singapore too that I could see. And I was supposed to go there just before the pandemic as well for a business trip that got canceled. And I was supposed to stay at the Marina Bay Sands Hotel and, have my moment on the infinity pool up there. Didn't happen. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make that happen this time. And did. And it was, a wonderful couple of days in Singapore, just short stop there. And then on to India, where I stayed at a yoga ashram. It's called the Vedanta Academy. So it's not like super secret or anything like that. Any dedicated yogi can apply and go for some time. It's just always transformative. That was my second trip to the Vedanta Academy, and just really deepened my understanding for yoga philosophy, and just deepening my practice and student of philosophy. So yeah, it was just a transformative experience all around, and glad I had those 2 days in Singapore to just, gear up for that transition from Australia into
I remember seeing the pictures on LinkedIn and I'm like, she's doing it. This is great. Like we said, if not now, when? So those bucket list trips you have to do, and it's important where you found yourself with some time to go explore. And I always think, what is my list? Whether it's family trip, friends all go together. And Singapore is definitely on my list, in Australia. I even joked with my kids, going, what if we had an international assignment and got relocated to Australia one day? And they're like, what is this love for Australia? I'm like naming rock bands from Australia. And they're like, no.
bringing it back to the rock.
Like, you spent several years within the international assignments, global mobility, and compensation space. What are some key areas you could really share with professionals, whether it's global mobility or HR teams that might be expanding their global mobility teams? Maybe things they're not thinking of, whether it's compliance or processes, something that where maybe a growing company just they don't maybe understand the risk of what's to come or what they need to be doing based on your experience.
Yeah, I remember at the previous employer I was at, it being a much smaller program, and of course we didn't have software, and I think we did have a tax provider, and we had a data provider providing kind of cost of living, and so it was very bare bones, but at the same time it was complicated because it's not as though this fast food chain had like a corporate headquarters in Australia or India or wherever they were going to. They needed to also kind of set up the employment there too. So if you don't have the right service providers to help you, or if you aren't aware of what is out there, to be able to leverage different companies who can take on some of that work for you. Companies then do get themselves in potential compliance risk situations, because it's not just the visa to get them there. It is, payroll and employment law and things like that that also need to be attended to. So I would say yes, like making sure you have those partners, those service provider partners that can really help mitigate that risk. And then if it's a more medium or large size company, acquiring other companies or acquiring other business, or creating new locations abroad, it's a very exciting time. So it's really exciting to be part of the global mobility team then. But you can get overwhelmed very quickly if you don't have the right team and service providers and processes to really execute well. So it's really partnering internally with HR, with the business, to understand what their needs are, and then try to rally your service providers to be able to provide destination services in these new locations, to ensure that visas, orientation trips, things like that can happen, and have the right expectation in mind of when, from a timing perspective, these things can happen. So it's really tight communication, and then leveraging your partners or getting geared up with your partners to execute. But then after kind of like the initial, you're going to see really quickly what processes are working for you and what need to be leveraged better, because you'll just see that your team is running in circles trying to get everything done or communicate. And you probably have to sit down and really look at your processes and see how things can be streamlined, or how you can leverage service providers even more to do some of that work for you.
We have some close friends that went overseas. It was a short-term delegation over 2 years. Every 3 to 5 months, they would come home. They were over in Europe, and they would come home for a month, maybe 6 weeks. And I was talking to a family member about it, and they're like, "Are they back? I thought they were there for 2 years." I'm like, "No, it's a more of a short-term delegation if they come back," and they didn't understand why. And it's like, well, it's really for tax and immigration reasons. And they're like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah." After so many days, even in Europe, they would have to leave the country they're at and go to Spain for 4 days to have a long weekend for visa and immigration reasons. It wasn't a true 2 year assignment where they were gone and only came home with the holidays. It was a little bit different. But some other neighbors and friends were like, "I didn't realize you go on an assignment." Then you start realizing, like, wait, what about my healthcare benefits? What about retirement? What about taxation? It's like all those things you don't think about until you're forced to think about it. So
Yep, absolutely.
you recently started your own consulting firm, MP International Consulting. When you pivoted and started your own firm, what are some key areas that you have learned? And have there been any unique surprises on your path so far? Looks a lot of people want to take that leap. So, what could you share about starting your own consulting firm?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most unexpected things was that the industry was so open and encouraging to me. So when I went to my association events, I'm on the board of the Michigan Relocation Council. So when I came to my next, board meeting and said, "Hey, I'm going to be starting my own consulting firm," I didn't expect everybody to be so happy for me and like so encouraging and want to help in any way they can. It's really encouraging me to help get my consulting firm off the ground. So really just the encouragement that I've received from the industry has been just overwhelmingly positive, and just really humbled by it.
That's great. I think that's an important lesson is that so many people want to see other people win. They want to see them do it. And yeah, we might be competing for the same role one day or on a project, but at the same time, there's so many people ready to help each other in different areas of life. And I think that's important because there's so many small businesses make up the vast majority of businesses within the United States. And I think a lot of people forget that at times. If there was someone that was ready to strike out, on their own, whether in an HR advisory services position, project management, whatever their area of expertise, is there any advice you would have for someone ready to start on their own path?
Yeah, I mean, first, I would say get involved in the industry. So be part of the associations. If you can, be on the boards of those associations. Really get involved. if they're in a corporate environment or service, like if they're working for a corporation, tied to the region, the industry, and they should get involved in those associations because they need to build, like for me, building my network was number one priority. And I started doing that years ago. But for me, maybe it's a little bit unique. I always knew I wanted to get into independent consulting at some point in my career. I actually started my career in consulting for a big four firm, and my whole hiring team got laid off, after about a year because Sarbanes-Oxley came out, and, there was consolidation between, the accounting firms and then their consulting. So this whole consulting area actually dissolved within, a year of me departing from it, and got absorbed into the consulting wing that spun off kind of as part of that. Long story short, I learned the consulting business from that experience, but I knew I didn't have the experience to really do it myself yet. I liked the concept of it and what I was part of, but I couldn't really do it yet. I was just assisting those that did have the experience and the know-how. So I decided at that point, okay, I need to go into, a corporation. I need to be, get industry experience, and then I can be a consultant. And it just happened that it worked out. Independent consulting was the right next step for me instead of going into a consulting firm. So somebody really needs to evaluate what not just what they want, but what the market is going to bear. So, if someone's just really disenfranchised by corporate America and they're like, I'm going to go out on my own, because that probably is very short-lived, because it's not a intentional type of focus on I really want to be of service to clients for the rest of my career and help tackle larger, industry fundamentals and problems, versus just taking a break from corporate America. So first, the intention has to be there. Then the market has to bear it. So you've got to really think about what services can you provide, and does the market need those services, and at what price will they purchase those services. So once you kind of figure out what your why is, what your services are, and confirm that, okay, there is a market for my services, then you can start looking at, okay, let me build my one pager. I don't have a resume anymore. I have a one-page services biography that is, my elevator pitch on my elevator pitch on one sheet of paper, creating that. And then before printing all these wonderful marketing materials, you've got to register your business and make sure it's available in the state that you're in. So you got to kind of nail yourself down and do some of the regulatory work of setting up the entity, getting yourself official, and then you can go do the fun marketing if you feel like that's a fun part of it. But really, you've got to get real with it and make sure the market is there to support it before running off and into creating t-shirts and things like that.
Looking at your consulting business now, what is your core mission and vision of your firm, and what sets you apart, from traditional corporate practices? So I'm just thinking, if I am an HR leader or a business unit leader at a large firm and I want to work with you, what would set you apart if I've never worked with an independent consultant before versus a larger company?
Yeah, so most of the time people are not going to find me. I'm not going to get cold. I might get a referral from somebody, but most of the time my clients, I already know them. I'm already very much in there, or have worked with them in the past, or had many conversations with them. So it's not as though they don't know what they're buying. They know what they're buying, and we've discussed it several times of the framework of what it is. And they're coming to me specifically because I have a unique perspective, 20 years of corporate HR experience, the majority of that being focused on global mobility. I've been through countless RFPs, and my background, my degree is actually in supply chain management, not HR, still under the business umbrella. So I have a very keen understanding of processes, technology, and process integration, and the big picture of the business and the supply chains that support them. So I know I have a unique skill set. So clients come to me or are attracted to me, or I already know them, and I'm able to sell that skill set to them, and it matches what they need. So there's no real breaking into a market when you're a consultant, I would say, for an independent consultant. You're generally already known for what you can deliver, and it's just a matter of getting the word out to your network and building, more and more connections. Then, those matches are organically happening already. So it's not as though I'm competing with the big four consulting firms, or like a McKinsey or a Accenture or something like that. I'm not competing with them. They have their own way of gaining clients, and in their own niche. I have my own too. It's not even comparable as to why someone would hire me as opposed to a consulting firm. If they really know what they need, then I fit that more. Or perhaps if they want something more that the big four are offering, then they go to them. So it's not, if I were trying to compete with the consulting firms or what was already out there on the market, I would just be spinning my wheels, because they have much bigger marketing budgets and reach than I do. So I have to differentiate myself on the skills, talent perspective that I have specifically.
I've worked with someone who is on the Detroit SHRM board, and he is an HR advisor, a team of one. And he has a very similar story with a different space, of course, because he's not a fractional HR leader. He is an HR advisor. So he has a client maybe in Northern Michigan, one in Ohio, where they call him saying, "What does this mean?" And he advises what to do. This is standard, or this is something you really need to pay attention to. There's a potential of an issue developing right here if you don't handle this now, today. A lot of our small businesses, maybe under 100 employees, they don't even have a full-time HR person.
Sure.
Um, so I can already see the similarities, just different industries or different areas of expertise. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to say it. I'm more of a global mobility advisor and, industry advisor. I can obviously get in there and do interim leadership of a global mobility department. I can do process and technology integration. I can get in there and do, as well as kind of be that advisor. But yeah, it's much more advisory, because that's what they're paying for, is like, okay, I want you to not just do this, but tell me if there's a better way to do it. That's where I see my service being the most useful.
And from an advisory point of view, are there any common pitfalls that you see clients or companies encounter in managing their global mobility?
I think you saw it in immigration a little bit too sometimes. Sometimes businesses will treat employees like commodities, like they're parts, and want to move them around on a dime for the company's benefit. And, not realizing that they're putting the employee at a lot of risk, and potentially the company at risk as well. So sometimes it's, managers not knowing the entire compliance kind of landscape, that will send employees on, business trips when they're more project work type of situations, that gets intermittent and gets more and more risky every time they come in and out of the country. Then on the flip side of that, there's also the situation where you're seeing a lot of not just like lump sums, but like signing bonuses in lieu of relocation, where the global mobility team doesn't even know this person is moving internationally, but that hiring manager just does not want to invest in the relocation. So they're like, and the employee might even say, I want this job so bad, I don't care, I'll forego relocation, but I need, $10,000 signing bonus, whatever it is, like just to help me move. But then they just don't realize what they don't know. Say that immigration is authorized, at a very minimum, to assist that international move. Well, when the family shows up and they're like, where do we live? how do we get social security numbers? How do we, whatever. It just becomes a total mess of not knowing what they don't know. And that $10,000 is gone like that. And, that employee is really ineffective then. And they might try to hide it because they wanted the job so bad that, they're willing to take the risk, but then their family life is just miserable until they can figure it out or rely on help from others to kind of get them through it. So that is where I see the most risk right now, is that hiring managers don't know what they don't know, and then they're putting their employees, even if the employee is saying yes, I'll do this anyways, they're putting that employee in a very difficult situation. And it's really hard to see that when you're in the global mobility team and you get called in at the last minute, and the family is really at their wits end, and you're just trying to help them move through getting settled, and so that they can wipe the slate clean and hopefully move forward with a better experience.
I think you and I both know one of the top indicators of an assignment being successful is the family happy. Because if everyone's miserable at home and you're at work trying to get things going, and they're in a new country, maybe learning a new language, it's culture shock. There's a lot of things going on. The kids in school. If everyone's barely treading water, it's not going to be a successful assignment. You have to have your four walls taken care of in any part of the world you're at in order to be successful at that role, whether you're sitting at a desk or out in the field, whatever it might be. And that touches on so many things. I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes, like you said, managers don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't see that improving. I feel like that leadership in corporate America is, I don't know where it's going to go. It's just one of those things where individuals need to really think about people as human beings, equal human beings, not commodities that, you just try to entice with a signing bonus to get them to come over and just chalk it up to it's all one great adventure for them. People need support, and multinational corporations are in the position to provide that support.
Having structure, I think, is key when it comes to that. Just having that person you check in with. What does this mean? I need to get some things out of storage that came. There's so many things that you just don't think about. That's really a good outlook. And I think one of the other phrases that is equally dangerous is a manager, like we always say, might be from a good place. Well, I did it this way 10 years ago and it was fine. Well, 10 years ago, that was a long time ago, whether it's a regulatory environment, that now we're post-COVID. COVID turned everything upside down, especially in the international assignment where embassies were closed and so forth. How is your leadership style evolved from corporate days to running your own consultancy? Because that's a big change. How is your leadership, taken on a life of its own?
So yeah, when I was part of a corporation, I mean, I certainly had to follow the guidelines and norms of the company in a certain way. I don't think boundaries is the right word. It's more like there's a specific expectation when you're in a corporate environment to manage your team to the goals of the company or to whatever the expectations are of management. When you own your own company, goals are very different. Team looks very different. Obviously, at the corporation, my team were immigration professionals, global mobility consultants, and then I managed service providers and relationships with HR business partners and other cross-functional teams. So it was a very different environment when you're, doing your own independent consulting business. Team is your CPA, contract attorney, financial planner. You have to build a different team that's supporting you because you don't have time to do all that stuff anymore, and it gets a lot more complicated. My service providers, but I call them my team, are really those people now, and in selecting the right people for me. And then my clients are the focus, but not, and then I would say it's all in a construct of what is my purpose is to help the industry, is to move the industry forward, to help solve problems or simplify complexities. That's my true mission, and do that with clients who are thriving and want to expand and be part of that moving, the industry forward. So it's a different goal than when, you're at a corporation and you have specific goals there, to move employee from one place to another as smoothly, efficiently as possible. And a program that does that in that way, it's just a totally different mindset when you're creating your own consulting company and you're looking at the industry from much farther distance away, because you're not, you're still very concerned that the end client in the end, moving from one place to another, is serviced, but you have to look at it from a much farther lens back to see how you can best service that employee, not just the one today, but the one, 20, 30 years from now, and how the industry is going to be able to not support that one person, but how the world just evolves beyond where we are now.
With your rich history of a career in global mobility and international assignments, do you have any advice for professionals that are looking to break into global mobility or, grow within the space? Because we both know you join a large company. I know someone from our previous company. They're somewhat fresh out of college, and they thought HR was training and development, compensation, HR generalists, and benefits. They had no idea of these other areas, including global mobility. That looks really interesting. Or how do I get involved in that? But I don't have the experience to obviously put my resume in for like an internal position. Or they see something external, like, I don't have any experience doing that. How do I get experience? How do you get experience when you have no experience to grow into something like that? So if there is someone fresh out of college or even in their HR role and they want to pivot to that center of expertise, what are some advice you'd be able to offer someone?
So a lot of associations are pretty open. So of course, SHRM is a great one if they're HR. SHRM has even some global mobility related to it, but just get involved there. And then if global mobility is your area where you're thinking, yes, that's where I want to focus, then start getting involved in, the worldwide ERC. And then there's local chapters like the Michigan Relocation Council. So that's what I would say, is get involved in those industry associations, because if you're not necessarily going to get that opportunity at the job that you're at now, then you need to meet people that potentially can help you, or you can, fit into their organization sometime in the future. So it's a long game. It's the same thing for hiring managers. How do I hire the best people? You got to go where they're at, Hamilton, you got to be in the room where it's at. But so same for the the entry level employee. If they want more exposure, they need to take themselves there. Nobody's going to bring that to them. It's be in the room where it happens. Learn. Be there, absorb, be curious. Same with hiring managers. Get out of your office and go and volunteer in associations, and you are going to meet people who are bright, and once you have an opening on your team, you're going to know who to go to. So you got to break that complacency of just going in, doing your work, going home, and expecting a promotion to be 2 years away. That's not how it happens. You got to be there. You've got to be there.
And looking back, your career in different corporations and then pivoting to your entrepreneurial journey, what has been one of the most significant learning moments in this process?
I would say, throughout my career, there have been some major learning points where it's like it takes everything just to make that transition. So from being an individual contributor to a people manager, that was a huge shift in my career. That it took years to really feel comfortable with that shift and really feel like I was doing a good job. Let's just say that. To my own standards. Performance evaluations were all good and everything, but to my own standards. Same when I was getting more senior, when I would have, supervisors and they were managing people. That was a tough transition too, because I wanted to get a little too hands-on with the new supervisors and tell that, so I had to kind of just let things play out, let people learn on their own how to be, a supervisor, still be there for support, of course, but not take over, every single time there was something that came up that was unexpected. And then I'd say now that I've transitioned into, being a an entrepreneur, totally different schedule, totally different motivation, totally different satisfaction with life in general too, totally different financial certainty, but it's just part of the growing process. So I would say anyone who's experienced career growth and along their career, they have probably had moments like this that I'm talking about that were just like really tough transitions, but they were so impactful. I mean, I think any parent goes through this. I'm not a parent, but I mean, it's just like it changes your life. And, you know, and it takes a while to feel like you're getting the hang of it, you know, and that you're doing it right, or that there's no wrong way to do it. And so that jump into entrepreneurship has been, you know, a similar type of journey. And it just requires my everyday commitment. So that's why I was saying, like, you don't just dabble in this. Like, you've got to be committed to it, because there's going to be major ups and downs, not just financially, but just personally, whether you feel like you can do it or not. And you know, if you can't face those doubts and move through them just like you did as a parent, you know, first time, it's not going to work, because it's a different different ball game than you know, being a parent. You have a child you have to take care of, and you have to figure it out.
That leads to something I'll fill you in on, related but unrelated, is that as the theme of my podcast, like everyone knows the intro of my podcast, I spent 10 plus years going all over Michigan and the Midwest. We always like to say we were trying to be actual rock stars, versus when you're in the corporate environment, oh, that person's such a rock star at Excel. It's like we're actually trying to be rock stars. And we look at it, we took it from an entrepreneurial point of view. We had our own bank account as an organization. Everything you just mentioned, we had a tax ID number. We filed taxes separately, insurance on the gear. We ran everything through. We never paid ourselves, and we had that aha moment when we were like meeting with producers and going to New York and going to showcases. And it's like, what is this? Is this going to turn into something? And it's like, if we're going to do it, I'd rather try to do it versus wonder what if. So that's why we were always all over and playing in different cities every weekend or every few weeks, trying to be strategic where we played, meeting some producers with top bands. Like, wait, they produced that rock album and they're interested in us. And then you're like, what is this?
Yeah. Well, I think that's very important, because I think that's the main thing that we're talking about here is you have to know your why. Whether it's your career in life, you need to know your why. And if you don't have a high commitment towards that why, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? No matter what you're doing. So it's like, get clear on that why, and everything else just kind of, it fills in. It's going to, you know, like momentum is going to take you that way once you get clear on that. And just like you were saying with your band, you got clear, like, yes, we want to try this. We need to give it a wholehearted try, and we're committed to it. And that's different than a wavering, like, I'm only going to do this if we make X amount of money. It's like, no, you got to give yourself a longer time horizon to say, okay, let's give ourselves at least a year to just put our full commitment behind it, and just see where it goes. You got to let yourself have that.
But one of the things I always like to do is ask people the following questions as we start wrapping things up. This is called our Encore section. To keep things human, what is the first thing of human resources? Is human. If you were to share your Spotify or Apple Music playlist, whatever you listen to, what are some artists or bands we would find?
Oh, it would be just a hodgepodge of a lot of different genres. But you're going to probably hear some Dave Matthews Band, maybe a little bit of Etta James, some classical, you know, some Beyonce. It's going to be everywhere, because every age, you know, I still very much identify and listen to some of the music from my teens, you know, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s. I mean, sometimes I cringe at some of the, you know, the 20s songs from the early 2000s, but, you know, I find myself bebopping. I'll sing along, you know, catch myself, and yeah, no, but I would say hodgepodge.
What was the last show, concert you attended, or play, anything that you might have attended? It was
Yeah,
a live
so
performance.
Next weekend, I'm going to go see the Book of Mormon, but the last show I've attended, I believe, was last summer. Dave Matthews Band. I go every year with my friend Gina. She's been in the fan club since the late 90s, so we go, we jam, we're close up. And we have a great time. And then Ben Harper's going to be at the Royal Oak Music Theater in June. So I snagged some tickets to that because I can walk to it and it's a tiny venue. And he was one of the only people, I saw him in concert in Australia back when I was studying abroad there as well. So it kind of is full circle for this year as well. A Ben Harper performance that I have not seen him in 25 years either. So
Nice. Yeah, speaking of Australia, we actually opened up for NXS, and
nice.
it was surreal that we were on stage at this amphitheater where they were performing with a new singer, and we played our original set, but we ended with one cover, and we did kind of like a rock metal version of Down Under from Men at Work. Obviously, NXS is from Australia, Men at Work's from Australia. And we didn't get to meet the band until after our set, but before theirs. And I looked stage left, and I'm like, the guitar player and bass player sitting there giving us thumbs up. And I grew up watching these guys on MTV. That was one of the most surreal moments of my life. And then we said, hey guys, we brought a case of Foster's. And they're like, this is piss back home. You know that, right? We don't drink this back in Australia. It's like Budweiser here. I was like, we were trying to be all welcoming. And they're like, yeah, this is terrible beer. Dude, we don't drink this.
I learned that my first day in Australia 25 years ago. Yeah. No Fosters while I was there.
No Foster's. That's great about the Royal Oak Music Theater. I mentioned to my wife and some friends that in September there's a concert coming. We should go. It's Tom Kiefer. And I got to look going, am I supposed to know who Tom Kiefer is? And I was like, the singer of Cinderella from the 80s. Like, oh, with LA Guns. And I was like, well, I'd rather go see him in Royal Oak because that's usually a Harpo show and I don't go to Harpo's anymore. So what is a guilty pleasure of yours?
Last summer, I had to get my windshield replaced at Safe Light. So I'm there sitting in the waiting room, and they have The Curse of Oak Island on the History Channel running, a marathon. I got totally sucked in. And so, this past summer, that was all I was watching. And my whole family was like, we are not watching another episode of Curse of Oak Island. But then I kind of got some people into it. So, like, my mom would watch it with me and everything. But my nieces and nephews are like, it was a big joke. So, yes, I would say that right now is my guilty pleasure, too. Every Tuesday.
What is a fun or unique fact about yourself that people might not know?
I lived across the street from a Hall of Fame baseball player for a short
Really?
time, about a year. Yep. No, I was, I think, around 12 years old. It was the first year. So I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and John Schmaltz, which most people know him from the Braves, but he was first with the Tigers right out of the draft. So the year he was with the Tigers, and he might have even bought the house just before that too. But yeah, it was like kitty corner across the street. So I remember knocking on his door selling Girl Scout cookies. His sister was there who bought the Girl Scout cookies. And then his sister ended up taking over the house, buying the house from him or whatever. And so I got to be good friends with his nieces and nephews growing up. But yeah, so that's kind of a fun fact. I lived across the street from John Schmaltz for
wow. That's awesome. Besides the show that you just mentioned, is there any other shows that maybe you have been binge watched on any of the big platforms recently?
Oh yeah, so the show Cross on Prime. It's like a suspense thriller. That was really good. I really recommend that. But right before bed, it is kind of intense. So, but yeah, that's a good one. Not necessarily for kids, but for adults. That's a nice suspense thriller. I recommend it.
I'm binging White Lotus and The Righteous Gemstones on HBO. That's kind of my two go-to right now.
Nice.
And I just found Daisy Jones and the Six on Prime about some 70s band, which I didn't realize is based on Fleetwood Mac in a loose way. So
that one was amazing. I watched that like a year ago. I loved that.
Yeah, I just found it and I'm about 5 episodes in. So as we wrap up, if people, are watching this and they realize I might need to reach out to Anna and say, I have some consulting work or I have some projects, or I need us to look at what our processes are, need to, pick her brain and and work with her, what are some ways people could reach out to you?
So, yeah, LinkedIn is an easy way to reach out to me. I have a website, ampinternationalconsulting.com. They can click on a contact me, contact us link there, and that goes to my email. So, yeah, there's a number of ways people can reach out to me. And I'd love to have a conversation with anybody who might need some HR corporate advising, especially around global mobility.
That's great. And I'll have links in the show notes and everything for everyone to click on as well.
Awesome.
Great. Well, this has been really insightful, and it's been great catching up and learning your new journey and in your path of pivoting from a corporate role to now being an entrepreneur in a global advisory role. With that being said, thank you everyone for tuning in, and keep rocking HR excellence.
Thank you.